Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our Tafseer class. We are doing the kitab known as Tafseer Al-Qurtubi, and tonight inshallah ta'ala we are beginning with a new surah. Allah has favored us so far to have completed Surah Al-Naba, Surah Nazi'at, Surah Abasa, and Surah Al-Takwir. So we have completed so far 4 surahs, which has taken us, if I am not mistaken, 47 classes to do 4 surahs. Mainly due to me being a bit on the slow side. But anyway, 47 classes, if I'm not mistaken, is what it's taken us for these 4 surahs. So tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we are fortunate enough to begin another surah of the Qur'an, and that is Surah Al-Infitaar. So without any extra delays, let us begin. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we are starting Surah Al-Infitaar. مكية عند الجميع وهي 19 آية. We are doing Surah Al-Infitaar. It is a Makki surah, meaning it was revealed in Makkah, according to everyone. Everyone's unanimous, this surah was revealed in Makkah. And the surah contains 19 ayat only. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We begin قوله تعالى إذا السماء انفطرت وإذا الكواكب انتثرت وإذا البحار فجرت وإذا القبور بعثرت علمت نفس ما قدمت وأخرت. These 5 ayat, now they are, before actually beginning the tafsir of these, or the brief translation, but there are 3 surahs in the Amma Para which are very similar in meaning, and that is Surah Takwir, Surah Infitar, and Surah Inshiqaq. The meanings of them are all 3 similar, and we basically very briefly mentioned a point regarding this when we did the beginning of Surah Takwir, which is that these 3 surahs, for the most part, it describes the end of the world. Not the day of Qiyamah per se, it does have things relating to Qiyamah, but it starts out with the destruction of the world. So we know what we passed by in Surah Al-Takwir. So let us begin now with Surah Al-Infitaar and see the slight differences in the Allah uses from an Arabic perspective. Allah uses different words, even though if you hear the English translation, at times the translation may sound quite similar. So the first ayah, إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انْفَطَرَتْ, which means that when the sky breaks apart, it splits, but we'll do the tafsir anyway. So when the sky breaks apart, وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انْتَثَرَتْ, and when the kawakib, we did nujum previously, so now we're doing kawakib. Kawakib is another word which also means stars. Can be referred to planets as well, but in the context it refers to stars. And when the stars fall, they scatter. When the stars are scattered, وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ فُجِّرَتْ, and when the seas erupt. What is it erupting? We did touch on a similar tafsir in Surah Al-Takwir. But anyway, I'm just doing the brief translation before getting into the tafsir itself. وَإِذَا الْقُبُورُ بُعْثِرَتْ, and when the graves, the contents at least of the graves, and the graves are scattered, they are upturned, in other words. عَلِمَتْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ وَأَخَّرَتْ, a person, a soul, will then know what it has sent forth and what it has kept back. So that's a brief verbatim translation. Let's move into the tafsir itself so we can see what is what. So we begin by قوله تعالى إذا السماء انفطرت. He say أي تشققت بأمر الله لنزول الملائكة كقوله ويوم تشقق السماء بالغمام ونزل الملائكة تنزيلا. He says, in the beginning of the surah, Allah says, إِذَا السَّمَاءٌ فَطَرَتْ, when the sky will split open. So he says it will split open with the permission of Allah, or with the command of Allah, for the malaika to come down in their droves. He says it is similar to, now he does Tafseer al-Qur'an bil-Qur'an. He says it's similar to another ayah which appears in Surah Al-Furqan wherein Allah says, وَيَوْمَ تَشَقَّقُ السَّمَاءُ بِالْغَمَامِ, when on that day, when the sky will split open with clouds, وَنُزِّلَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ تَنزِيلًا, and the malaika will come down in their droves. So he's saying that إذا السماء انفطرت is referring to that same incident. وقيل تفطرت لهيبة الله تعالى. So okay, this tafsir says that the sky will split apart out of the awe and the awe and fear that it has for Allah Ta'ala. So two opinions. Number one, Allah will split the sky and the malaika will all come down. Or two, that the earth itself, the sky itself will split on account of the awe that he has for Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Okay, so he says والفطر الشق يقال فطرته فانفطر ومنه فطر ناب البعير طلع فهو بعير فاطر. So he's explaining now always Imam Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, he focuses a lot on linguistics in his tafsir to show you that linguistically the ayah can mean all of these things. So he proves from a linguistic perspective the many meanings of each individual word. So he says al-fatr. What is fatr? Infitaar, as you know, it says ashaq. Shaq means to split, to break. He said, يقال فطرته فانفطر. He's using now the pure linguistics anyway to show you that I split something, so it's split open. If we were to translate it in that manner, because obviously English is not able to do the sarfi, to at least show the difference from a sarf perspective that Arabic can. But anyway, he says fatara nabul ba'ir. It says linguistically, you use the word fatara when you say fatara nabul ba'ir. That nab means the tooth, so the fatara nabul ba'ir, the camel's tooth has fatara. So what does fatara means? طلع. In other words, the camel's tooth has come out. So he says, فَهُوَ بَعِيرٌ فَاطِرٌ. If you talk about a camel being fatir, it means a camel whose teeth has come out. So now we're not exactly talking about the teething baby over here where the teeth comes out, but you get the picture. It's just that he's showing that linguistically, fatara has been used in that context. To practically, not it can be used like that. Literally, it is used like that. So it's something which comes out. So the sky, it comes out from its place, which is to break apart. In other words, the gum breaks apart and a tooth comes out. So the sky breaks apart and the malaika come out. That's what he's showing you, that linguistically the word is used in this context. So when you understand the linguistics of the thing, if you can see a gum in your mind and the gum splitting open for something to push through, so the sky splits open and the malaika pour through. In other words, it's the type of picture he's trying to bring into your mind, not from a tafsir perspective, but literally showing that linguistically, that's even what the ayah is telling you. So he says, وَتَفَطَّرَ الشَّيْءُ تَشَقَّقَ وَسَيْفٌ فُطَارٌ أي فيه شقوق قال عمترة وسيفي كالعقيقة وهو كمعي سلاحي لا أفل ولا فطارة. Okay, so he just showed also that تفطر, when you use it on this pattern, it means تشقق, something which has been broken up. So he says a سيف فطار is a sword which has like breaks in it. And he quotes a poem and he says وَقَدْ تَقَدَّمَ فِي غَيْرِ مَوْضِعِ, and we've already passed by this in more than one place. In other words, he means previously in the Quran we passed by the tafsir of this, so he's not going to repeat the tafsir of the word fatara over and over and over again. We did it sufficiently before, so he's not going to do it again. Obviously, we didn't do it in our class because we started from the beginning of Amma Para. But anyway, we are doing just the kitab as is, so we will continue on as is. So we move on further. He says, وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انْتَثَرَتْ, and when the stars will scatter, as I said. Nathara, it means to scatter. Istinthar, if you know, in wudu, you have istinshaq and istinthar. Istinthar, nathara, intatharat, it's all the same root word. So obviously, if you know what that means in wudu, then you understand how it fits in here with the blowing, spreading, falling sort of meanings that word contains. So he says, تساقطت نثرت شيئا أنثره نثرا فانتثر والاسم النثار والنثار بالضم ما تناثر من الشيء ودر منثر شدد للكثرة. Okay, so I'll add in from my perspective, from my side here this time. He says when the stars fall. So Intathara, like I said, has got multiple meanings. One of which means to spread out, to throw. Think of it as having a handful of sand, and you spread your sand. You throw your sand out all like that. So that's one way of using it. But what he's talking here, he's using more in the meaning of to fall down. We know that the stars are going to fall down. We just did وإذا النجوم كدرت وإذا النجوم كدرت. Like I said, we'll use different ayat from different surahs. The meaning from an English perspective would come basically the same, but Allah uses absolutely different words. وإذا النجوم كدرت. نجوم انكدر. كواكب انتثر. And yet, if you were to linguistically translate them, you could come to the same translation from an English perspective, even though Allah has used four totally different words at least. Kawakib, plural of the word kawkab, nujum, plural of the word najm, inkadara and intathara, and yet the meaning comes out to be the same thing. So Allah is giving us a picture. But, the sad part is that English is so narrow that you can't see the difference the way you see it in Arabic. Like I was giving the explanation now, the way the gum breaks open for the tooth to push through. So when you see each word gives a picture in and of its own self. But in English, we just say when it splits. So, it doesn't give you anything special. But when you read the Arabic word itself, then you understand there are more specialities to it than what English is able to give across. So in Tathara, he says, Nathartu shay'a anthuruhu nathra fantathara. So he's using only linguistics over here, which is to, I threw something, it fell down, you use the word in this manner and everything of the sort. So, but linguistically, like I said, istinthar from a wudu perspective, one is to throw, you throw the water into your nose and you blow the water out. So, istinthar in that case is to draw the water up, and istinshaq is to blow the water out. So shaqqa, like we just been doing a number of times, and we will still do in a later surah as well. But anyway, so what the picture that this ayah is telling you is that when the stars fall down from their places and scatter all over, in other words, it's not going to be, think of it this way. You see the stars standing in the sky above your head. So they're not going to come straight down all on one single place, home in on one location, let's say on the White House, and everything fall on there and crush it into the ground. It's not going to fall like that. It's going to scatter from their places, falling all over the place like this here, crashing down. It will fall down and scatter and crash. That's the picture that the ayah is giving you, that when the stars fall down and crash and scatter in that way. But like I say, because he did a similar tafsir in the previous surah, so he doesn't delve too deeply into it. He moves on further. He moves to the next ayah. He says, وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ فُجِّرَتْ, and when the seas will explode. What is exploding? He says, أي فجر بعضها في بعض فصارت بحرا واحدا على ما تقدم. So he gives the same tafsir as what came in Surah At-Takwir. He says, they will explode from their places and join up one into the other, and they will become one massive sea. In other words, you've got this Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. You got this big body of water here and there and everything. So he's saying that at the end of the world, when the world is being destroyed, all the water will flood out from its places. In other words, that the seas will rise. And if the sea rises, you know how it is. If a normal dam rises, then it spreads across, and you have your dam reaching till the sea into this river and everything like this, and the whole land disappears under the water. So here he's saying that the water will will explode from its places with such force that the entire earth will be covered with water and every piece of land will be beneath the water. So it will become one big massive body of water, the entire earth. He says, this is what we previously did mention in Surah Al-Takwir, so he's not delving further into that. But he goes further, he says, قال الحسن فجرت ذهب ماؤها ويبست وذلك أنها أولا راكدة مجتمعة فإذا فجرت تفرقت فذهب ماؤها وهذه الأشياء بين يدي ساعة على ما تقدم في إذا الشمس كورت. Okay, so he says that Imam Hassan rahimahullah, he said, another meaning of fujirat, when the seas will fujira, he says, when the seas will dry up. He says that the water will disappear and it will become dry. He says the reason for this is because firstly the waters will be still. You know, in other words, each sea, big lake, great lakes and things as they call them, each one will be still in its place. We're not talking about the fact that the seas and they move, they're always moving, but we're talking about literally Atlantic Ocean stands there and the Indian Ocean stands there, and you know, they stay in their places. So they are rakidatun mujtami'a, they are as they are. فَإِذَا فُجِّرَتْ, but when they explode, tafarraqat, the water will splash out. But in other words, think of it this way. If you had all the water and it were to blow up into the sky, the water won't go up in, you know, like straight up and come straight back down. It will come with such force that it will scatter all over. And when the water scatters, it becomes, so to speak, smaller drops, thus making it easier for it to dry up. I'm talking from a normal practical perspective that we all can understand. So فَإِذَا فُجِّرَتْ تَفَرَّقَتْ فَذَهَبَ مَاؤُهَا. So as the water explodes out of its places, unlike the previous tafsir which says the waters now grow in its explosion, so it covers the earth with water, this tafsir gives the entire opposite, and it says the water will explode out of its places and it will dry up. So فَذَهَبَ مَاؤُهَا, and thus the oceans will all be left dry. There'll be no water left in it at all. He says وَهَذِهِ الْأَشْيَاء, all of these things that has been spoken about is بَيْنَ يَدَيِ السَّاعَةِ, it will happen just as these are the signs of the final hour, the destruction of the world. This is not the day of Qiyamah. This is not something that will happen just randomly anytime. And it's not something that will happen in the lives of any Muslim, because before these signs take place, Allah would have caused all the Muslims to have passed away, and at this point in time, the world will be inhabited by only the worst of creation. Only the worst of kuffar will be alive on the surface of the earth, and they are the ones who will witness the destruction of the world. No Muslim will be around to witness it. So he says, we mentioned this previously also in إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, so once again, he's not going to delve much into it. Moving to the next ayah, it says وَإِذَا الْقُبُورُ بُعْثِرَتْ. It says أي قُلِبَتْ فَأُخْرِجَ مَا فِيهَا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا أَحْيَاءً يُقَالُ فَعَثَرْتُ الْمَتَاعَ قَلَّبْتُهُ ظَهْرًا لِبَطْنٍ. Okay, he says firstly وَإِذَا الْقُبُورُ بُعْثِرَتْ, which I translated as when the graves will be overturned or turned inside out, whatever you want to refer to it as. He says kulibat. Kulibat means turned like upside down. فَأُخْرِجَ مَا فِيهَا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا أَحْيَاءً. So where previously the people of the graves were dead inside their graves, and we're talking dead here in the sense that you were dead from a worldly perspective in your grave. So Allah will cause with this. So in other words, what you're understanding from this tafsir is that this is not referring to, or at least these mufassirin are not taking it in the context of this being pre the end of the world. They are taking this more to be the day of Qiyamah itself. So he says that فَأُخْرِجَ مَا فِيهَا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا أَحْيَاءً. So the inmates of the graves will be turned upside down. So you were previously in the earth, now you'll be above the earth alive. So now he goes to a linguistic perspective. بعثرت المتاع, I did بعثر of the goods. So he says قلب, which means قلبته ظهرا لبطني. In other words, I turned it upside down. So وإذا القبور بعثرت means when the graves are turned upside down. The people in the graves are brought upside down, not them being turned upside down, but the what was previously under the ground now becomes on top of the ground. Thus, the people who are in the grave are now above the grave, on earth, alive for the reckoning. So he says, وَبَعْثَرْتُ الْحَوْضَ وَبَحْثَرْتُهُ إِذَا هَدَمْتُهُ وَجَعَلْتُ أَسْفَلَهُ أَعْلَاهُ. So he says, like if you did ba'thara of a pond, it means that when you have destroyed it and you have made the bottom of it, it stops. In other words, think of it in the context of Sodom and Gomorrah, like how it was explained previously in the Tafseer, that Jibreel alayhi salam took with the tip of his wing and, lifted the town up to the sky, that the inmates of the sky could hear the voices of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then he smashed it down into the ground, turned them upside down and smashed them into the ground. So he says that is what is asfalahu a'lahu. The bottom part is turned into the top. So in other words, the inner parts of the graves become what is on top of the grave. A fanciful way of saying that whatever was in the graves are now up and out on top. So that's one tafsir. He says, وَقَالَ قَوْمٌ مِّنْهُمُ الْفَرَّاء بُعْثِرَتْ أخرجت ما في بطنها من الذهب والفضة. A group of ulama, including Imam al-Farra, they understood this ayah slightly different. They took it in the context of not qubur, but qubur referring to the earth. So when the earth will do this ba'thara, so what does it mean? He says when the earth will give up the gold and silver that it contains within it. He says وَذَلِكَ مِنْ أَشْرَاطِ السَّاعَةِ أَن تُخْرِجَ الْأَرْضُ ذَهَبَهَا وَفِضَّتَهَا. He says, and that is because this is one of the signs of the hour, meaning prior to Qiyamah, that the earth will give out its gold and its silver. Now, you've read, come across at least sometimes a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which says that, the river will uncover a mountain of gold and, all of these sort of things. So these are things that are currently hidden. People don't see it. But a time will come when these things will be exposed, and thus people will fight over the money and all that sort of stuff. So he's saying that keeping this ayah in mind, like with that hadith, then it means that when not the graves, but the earth itself is turned up inside out. So the gems and the gold and the diamonds, and forget about gold and diamonds, the stuff that were previously under the ground, you couldn't see it, you didn't even know it was there, but now Allah turned things upside down, and those gold and diamonds and whatnot that were in the ground are now above the ground, and it's right there for you to be able to take it. Okay, we did end the tafsir of that point. Let's see, maybe we can finish this last ayah over here, the last paragraph, and then we can stop for tonight, inshallah ta'ala. So he continues on, he says, عَلِمَتْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ وَأَخَّرَتْ, that then a person will know what he has sent forth and what he has kept back. He says, مثل ينبأ الإنسان يومئذ بما قدم وأخر. In Surah Al-Qiyamah, Allah says, a person will be informed on that day what he has sent forth and what he had kept back. So he says, وَتَقَدَّمْ, and that was covered in Surah Al-Qiyamah, so he's not going to delve into that right now. But he says, وَهَذَا جَوَابٌ إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انْفَطَرَتْ لِأَنَّهُ قَسَمٌ فِي قَوْلِ الْحَسَنِ وقع على قوله تعالى علمت نفس. يقول إذا بدت هذه الأمور من أشراط الساعة ختمت الأعمال فعلمت كل نفس ما كسبت فإنها لا ينفعها عمل بعد ذلك. So he says that, first tafsir over here, that علمت نفس ما قدمت وأخرت. We did the previous 3 ayat prior to this, wherein Allah says إذا الشمس كورت, for example, إذا السماء انفطرت, all of these ayat of the sort. So إذا السماء انفطرت وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انْتَثَرَتْ وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ فُجِّرَتْ. So 1, 2, 3. So he says that it is not merely news that Allah is informing us of. It is Allah taking an oath by these three things that are going to take place. So after taking an oath by these three things, it is when Allah takes an oath, as you know, it's always to draw your attention to something which is extremely important. So he says that what Allah is doing here is taking an oath by those three things, and the oaths culminate in this ayah. Why is Allah taking an oath? Allah is taking an oath to tell you that عَلِمَتْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ وَأَخَّرَتْ, that when all of this take place, then you will come to know. In other words, this is the fulfillment of why I am taking those oaths, that, you know, definitely these things are going to take place, and then you are going to know. You know, you may think it's not going to happen. You couldn't be more wrong. So anyway, he says this is according to Imam Hassan, that this ayah is, those three ayat were oaths that Allah was taking, and this was the culmination of it. So that's the one tafsir. So alimat nafsun, he says يقول إذا بدت هذه الأمور. So the okay, let's go get to explain what the ayah means. He says when these things take place, min ashrati الساعة, of the signs of the qiyamah, you know, the things that will lead up to the destruction of the world. ختمت الأعمال. Deeds will come to an end. There's no more doing good deeds at this point. فعلمت كل نفس ما كسبت. So every person will come to know what he has earned. فإنها لا ينفعها عمل بعد ذلك. Because no person will, his deeds will not be able to benefit him after that. You know, like from the signs of Qiyamah is that the Muslims will be branded as Muslim and the Kafir will be branded as Kafir. No person, the doors of Tawbah will be closed on that day. This happens all prior to all of these signs of Qiyamah taking place. But anyway, so those who are Muslim on that day, they'll be Muslim. And those who are Kafir on that day, they'll be Kafir. There will be no more Tawbah. There will be no more people who can become Muslim. And those who are Muslim will not become Kafir. It's the end of the end. You know, it's like the last leg before the destruction of the world when that takes place. But anyway, he says, so after that, no more a'mal that you do will be able to benefit you. But another tafsir says وقيل أي إذا كانت هذه الأشياء قامت القيامة فحوسبت كل نفس ما عملت وأوتيت كتابها بيمينها أو بشمالها فتذكرت عند قراءة جميع أعمالها. This is another tafsir over here, is that when all of these things are taking place, like we're discussing, it's the destruction of the world. The destruction of the world leads up to the day of Qiyamah, Qamatil Qiyamah. Now Qiyamah takes place. فَحُوسِبَتْ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا عَمِلَتْ. And each person will now be taken to task with regards to the deeds that he had done. وَأُوتِيَتْ كِتَابَهَا بِيَمِينِهَا أَوْ شِمَالِهَا. That you'll either be given your book of deeds in your right hand or your left hand. If you are a good person, in your right hand. If you're a bad person, in your left hand. So, فَتَذَكَّرَتْ. That day, you will now come to know, you will remember. عند قراءة جميع أعمالها. You will remember when you are reading all of the a'mal that, you know, these are all the a'mal that I had done. You'll now come to see whether it is for you or against you on that day. So he says, عَلِمَتْ نَفْسُ مَا قَدَّمَتْ وَأَخَّرَتْ. That takes place on the day of Qiyamah, in simple terms. وقيل هو خبر وليس بقسم وهو الصحيح إن شاء الله تعالى. Imam Al-Qurtubi ends on this point. He says that these four ayat in essence are not an oath. It is Allah informing us. So Imam Hassan felt it was an oath that Allah was taking. Imam Al-Qurtubi differs and he said, no, it's actually information that Allah is telling us. Allah is telling us that the sky will split open, that the stars will fall down from their places and scatter, and that the what is in the earth will be turned inside out. All of this, and then a person will come to know what he had done, whether it's going to be for him or against him. So it is information and news that Allah is giving us, and not an oath that Allah is taking. And he says, Imam Al-Qurtubi says, وَهُوَ الصَّحِيحُ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. And he feels, inshallah, that this is the correct view, that it is not an oath, but rather it is information that Allah is giving us. So that's the end of these 5 ayat, and we'll stop then on this point here for tonight, inshallah ta'ala. Next week we will resume from ayah number 6, but like I say, that'll be next week. We'll continue for a little while longer until we reach uh, uh, 2-3 more classes before we end, and we'll stop then until after Ramadan. But obviously I'll mention that closer to the time when we plan on ending. But for now we end on this point here for tonight, inshallah ta'ala. Until next time we end and we say wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad, subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.